Hi, welcome to EdVantage. I'm Dr. Jody Richardson Delgado. Today we're going to be talking about humanistic and trait theories. Humanistic theories generally emphasize a positive view of humanity. Some of the key figures are Rogers and Maslow. Now, Maslow has what's called a hierarchy of needs. He talks about how we need to go through these specific levels in order to reach really our highest potential. At the bottom level are our physiological needs. So things like water, food, shelter, sleep, all of this is part of our physiological needs. Once those needs are met, then we can really concentrate on our safety needs. So we do have this need for safety, personal security, employment, resources, things like that. Once our safety needs are met, then we want to belong and we want to be loved and we want to love other people. So love and belonging is the next level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is where we form friendships, we find intimacy with others, family, we have some type of connection with other people. And with this connection, once those are established, then we really want to gain esteem. And this is where we want to gain respect of others, and we want to respect the people around us. We want to have recognition, and we want to give recognition to others. We start to seek freedom and strength from those relationships. And then finally, once we have these first four levels met, then we reach self-actualization. And this is the desire to become the most that we can be. This is really the highest point that Maslow originally talked about. More recent hierarchy of needs have added other levels, but these are the original hierarchy of needs that Maslow talks about. Something that should be noted is we kind of go in and out of these different levels. Sometimes if our safety needs are suddenly not being met, then we have to go back to that rung and repair what it is that we need for safety and then move through and up through the levels above. The next concept that humanistic theory talks about is congruence. Congruence is the overlap of the self and one's experiences. If there is congruence between the self and someone's experience, then they are said to be well adjusted. When there is incongruence, the way that someone defines themselves, the way that someone feels about themselves, when that is not congruent with their experience, then that person is maladjusted. Maladjustment can lead to depression and other types of issues. So for example, if I say I'm a good student and I define myself as a good student, but my experience, my first semester of college, let's say, is to get D's and F's in all of my classes, my self-concept is not matching my experience, and therefore I'm maladjusted. So something needs to shift. So I might need to shift my experience, and that's typically what we'll see. Maybe I took too many classes that were too difficult for me, or maybe I'm not studying effectively for my exam, so I need to go back and look at the way I'm studying, or maybe look at the balance of classes that I've had, because I have had success as a student previously, and there often our self-concepts don't come out of nowhere. They're based on our experiences and what people tell us and what we tell ourselves. Our experience, when it matches that, then we have congruence. So we want to change our experience to really match that self. The other thing that we can do is adjust our self-concept. But in the example that I just gave you, we really want to adjust the experience to match that self-concept. Other things that the humanistic theory really revolutionized the way that we do therapy. Rogers talks about unconditional positive regard, client-centered therapy, and active listening. With unconditional positive regard, Rogers talks about that we need a space where we can be who we are without conditions being placed on us. So this is where Rogers talks about providing a space where someone can tell you something and not feel like they need to measure up to the expectation of the therapist or of the situation around them, that they can tell this person or tell the therapist what really is going on with them and not feel judged for that, but feel this positive regard towards them. Now, client-centered therapy really shifted some things in the world of therapy. Before this time, the therapist was seen as the expert and was very directive and how to work through a client's problems or issues. So the therapist would direct that client as to how to resolve those issues. What Rogers talked about is that the client is really the expert of themselves. They know their relationships. They know themselves better than anyone else. And really what a therapist's role is to help them discover what some of those issues are and how to resolve what some of those issues might be. So the therapist is trained to help resolve different relationship issues, but not each one of those techniques is going to work for every client. So it's really the work between the therapist and the client to help find which of those techniques or different ways that a client can use to resolve some of those conflicts and to really live their best life. Another technique that Rogers talks about is active listening, really truly understanding what the client is saying, not just interpreting what the client is saying. So before this time, the therapist would interpret dreams or interpret what the client was saying. Now, what Rogers talked about was the client would say something and the therapist would reflect back what the therapist thought that client was saying. And the client was then expected to confirm, yes, that is what I meant, or no, this is what I was actually trying to say. Because sometimes we say things and we think we're being clear in the way that we're describing maybe our relationship with our parents. And in fact, the therapist is on a different thought pattern altogether or has interpreted that very differently. So this is part of that relationship building that Rogers talks about in a therapy session. There's many pros and cons to humanistic theories. Some of the pros, as I've talked about it, change the way that we do therapy. And many clients report success using these humanistic therapeutic techniques. Some of the cons, very naive assumption in that everyone wants to meet their highest potential and that everyone is on this path to goodness. Congruence and self-actualization are hard to measure scientifically, and those are some of the cons with this theory as well. Next, we have trait theories. Now, trait theories are personal characteristics used to describe someone. The key figures are Allport, Cattell, Eisnick, McCrae, and Costa. You see here, these are Cattell's 16 traits, and they're on a continuum. Cattell actually narrowed these down from 32 traits, and Cattell talks about being reserved, concrete, affected by feelings, submissive, serious, expedient, shy, tough-minded, trusting, practical, forthright, self-assured, conservative, group-dependent, undisciplined, and relaxed. And of course, this is all on a continuum. And oftentimes when you take personality tests to see if your personality would fit with maybe a profession, they're looking at the personality characteristics of people who are in that field, so the average personality characteristics, and how that measures against yours. So you can see on the graphic that if we look at airline pilots in the kind of light blue, they're more emotionally stable than the average individual who would be right in the middle, that 5. They're also more tough-minded than the average individual. They're also more self-assured and self-controlled. The creative artist, on the other hand, is more abstract in their thinking. They also are more expedient. They're also more sensitive, also more trusting. So these are some of the characteristics that we would see of creative artists. Writers are those individuals that are in the dark blue, and we see that they're strong in abstract thinking. They're more serious, more sensitive, more imaginative, as well as self-sufficient. So these 16 traits are used on a continuum, and you will see them in a lot of personality tests. However, when doing research with these 16 traits, we didn't find cross-cultural support. It was McCrae and Acosta who looked at the Big 5, or the 5-factor model. You'll also hear this as OCEAN, because that's the acronym of openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Again, these are on a continuum. And when they were doing their research, they found that these were the 5 personality characteristics that they found cross-culturally all over the world. So with openness, a low score would mean that someone is practical, conventional, prefers routine. A high score would be someone who is curious, independent. Conscientiousness, a low score would be impulsive, careless, disorganized. A high score would be hardworking, dependable, organized. Extroversion, a low score would be more reserved and withdrawn. A high score would be outgoing, warm, and seeks adventure. Agreeableness, a low score would be critical, uncooperative. A high score would be helpful and trusting. With neuroticism, a low score would be calm, even-tempered, and secure. A high score would be anxious, unhappy, and prone to negative emotions. So you notice with these 5 personality characteristics, the OCEA, we typically would want a higher score, and that's what's typically valued, and a lower score with the N, or neuroticism. There's pros and cons to the trait theory as well. Some of the pros are that it describes and organizes personality characteristics. There is scientific evidence in cross-cultural and cross-species studies. So we've done studies with the Big Five in particular and looked at dogs and dolphins and elephants and primates, and we do see that they do have different personalities. And if you've ever owned a dog or two, you know that they are a little different. Everybody has a different personality, even animals. Cons, there's only 5 characteristics of that Big 5 factor model. There's also something where we are different in different situations. So with stability versus change, and also ignoring situational factors, these come together in that, have you ever been taking a personality inventory and thought to yourself, well, do they mean when I'm at work, or do they mean when I'm relaxing with my friends? Do they mean when, it's night and I have a lot of energy, or in the morning when I'm groggy and trying to get up in the morning? So there's a lot of change that happens throughout the day, let alone in different situations that we're in, that these personality inventories don't necessarily take into account. I hope this video has helped. Please click on the EdVantage logo to subscribe.